Last week, I have been speaking about that most of humanity is trapped in using the mind in anthropocentric ways, having us and our species in the center of our world. And it's understandable, but somehow now we are called to find a way out of this trap because it has become deadly. Because over the last few centuries, our education systems, have been increasingly deeper and deeper set in the beliefs that humans are kind of special and have a right, to basically use the whole more than human world and even, some groups of humans for their own benefit. What I've called last time human supremacy. And the value of the modern human world has been and still today, is mostly understood and measured in relation to how it can benefit humans on a rather superficial level in terms of consuming and status and things like that. And even, the original transmission of the Buddha's teaching is also held in an anthropocentric framework to start with, about, ending suffering, basically. But it starts with that framework, but then it leads to an increasing opening and letting go as the practice unfolds. Because yes, we do have to start where we are in order to unravel, metabolize, integrate, and increasingly open up. And because now, our impact on the biosphere has become so massive, as we all know, and that's, I think, where we all here, we are recognizing we can't go on like this. But at the same time, we're not sure how to solve this, because we're tending, to think about the crisis on the same level of consciousness which has created the crisis. And that's just like turning in circles. It doesn't really work that way. And I think that's also a reason, why we are doing these practices together, because we already know that the crisis can't be solved on the same level where it has been created, but there needs to be a dropping deeper. Simply, because our human bodies have emerged from the planet, as, I've said many times, through the help of our mothers. And because of that, because the body has emerged out of the planet and is kept alive by eating, drinking, breathing, and so on, we are actually all indigenous to the planet. Even, us overeducated Westerners, we have temporarily lost the access to this knowing, that we really are indigenous to the planet. Because there's a lot of modern education pasted on top of it. Because until short, indigenous ways of knowing haven't been really respected and understood. The value hasn't been understood, but they have been, more judged as not being, being behind us. And now it turns out, no, this is absolutely not true. We have gone a bit on a sidetrack, with the way how we have been looking at, science, for example. We have been overemphasizing the intellect and forgotten this deep interbeing with the planet. And the destruction of indigenous ways of knowing in Europe started with the witch hunts in the early 15th century and lasted for about 300 years. And then, that it was also exported to America. There were also some witch hunts, in the 18th century. And basically, people fled Europe and came over here with all of that in tow, basically, bringing the trauma of that brutality and stamping out, of the indigenous ways of knowing, and brought it over here, and then did the same here. But now all of that is changing. And there's more and more acknowledgement of the skillfulness of these indigenous ways of providing support, through traditional ceremonies and technologies. And many of the indigenous people have been able to keep the transmission of this kind of knowledge, and the rituals and observances have been able to keep those alive. And in a way, we can say that indigenous peoples are system experts. They have the capacity, to think on a system level. They are not just like me and what I want, but they are seeing themselves embedded on a systems level, and have preserved, the capacity to sense and feel into the threads of connection with the biosphere that keeps us alive. Exactly, that kind of knowledge which we have lost, but it's still, we can remember it, by respecting it, by honoring it, by going full circle. It's not about, leaving behind what we have accomplished, with science and other forms of education, but to balance it. And, the Buddha's teaching is so often about balancing. And that's also, what right view is. Right view, there is a mundane right view, which is about karma and about taking care about one's responsibilities as a human being. And then there's the super mundane right view, which is about transcending. And they have to be walked in unison. And that's why the Buddha's teaching is called the middle path, or the middle way. And, today there is about 465 million indigenous people on the planet across 90 countries. And they make up about 5% of the world population, but they manage about 80% of biodiversity on the planet. 5% of people manage 80% of biodiversity and 33% of the forests. So this is an amazing truth to really take that in. And they do so, since a very long time. And most people don't know about it. So they have kept that know-how, how to co-evolve with the modern human world and to live in reciprocity, because they have technologies, in order to communicate with the land, with the rivers, the spirits, the ancestors, the deities. Those are also technologies, which have been called superstitious and so on, by our own educational systems. But now it turns out they are important, for keeping the connection alive And we need to find ways, of bringing these two ways of knowing together in this era of polycrisis, where our approaches to living have reached their limits, and there needs to be something new needs to be added. Or maybe even, something really very ancient needs to come back into the circle. And I think this is what's happening right now, and it's beautiful. And it's not about going back into the past, but it's about coming full circle and connecting those two streams of knowing with each other. And in America, there's often the speaking, about the eagle, which stands for the Western ways of knowing, and the condor stands for indigenous and more intuitive ways of knowing, meeting and coming together. And this is what we need, I think, as a civilization in order to evolve into the next level. And for that, we need to empower indigenous people all over the world, because it's simply essential to our survival, as a species. To bring them more into leadership positions and to decolonize our minds and re-indigenize ourselves, by simply, coming back to the ground, by really training ourselves in the perception that this body and the body of the earth are one body. So it's a crisis of perception, which can be worked with, because we do have guidance. And we can use some of these ancient technologies, and work with them in a way which we can work with in this time and in these circumstances, by bringing these different ways of knowing together and synthesizing them. For example, the traditional lineages of indigenous wisdom and bringing in the Buddhist lineage, for example. And how can those two work together? And I was just recently at a Earth Awareness retreat at the Berry Center of Buddhist Studies in Massachusetts, and that's exactly what was happening there. So finding a way, to work with this crisis of perception, and doing what we can, to open up and remember our indigeneity. And with that, our capacity to feel and sense into these threads of connection. And now I'd like to, change over to a guided meditation. And today I have prepared this medicine song, or Ikaro, by Manari Ushigua. Last time I wasn't able, to bring it up on the screen, but today I can do it. And Manari Ushigua is a traditional healer and leader of the Sapara nation in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And this kind of medicine song supports us to receive information from the biosphere and from the ancestors. And, I've received it from the Pachamama Alliance. And let us start by first just settling in, and then I bring up the song. So allowing the breath to take you into the body. Sensing the weight of the body on the cushion, on the chair, wherever you're sitting right now. Just checking in with yourself what you're bringing to this meeting today. And how it feels to meet the community. We are all sharing this interest in reawakening our indigeneity. Because we all know, that the thinking mind can only go that far. And needs to be grounded in something much deeper. The out breath, we can, gently send down some roots into the soil underneath where we are sitting. And with the in-breath, we can, breathe up the stability and the stillness, the vastness of the body of the earth. That living intelligence, which always finds a way. And, to whom we can turn for guidance. I'm not going to bring up the medicine song. To help us to receive information. It's like a medicine which makes us more open, which attunes us to the frequency of the biosphere.
Iyaw naka baya chaymi gisi nawang minyukan chi cao say ta su maka paska chi nguni Kabaya Chayawan Chayama Ihau Nomon Doibin Sumata Kayama Chayma Okumoni re 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 re
Just sensing into the body. how can we bring back those ancestral memories in our own bodies? That very gentle touch, I think, which Manari so clearly communicates, a very gentle touch. In relationship to the modern human world. And how, can our ways of living be re-informed? Because this is what we need to do. And what I have learned at this meeting at the Berry Center of Buddhist Studies is that Indigenous people want to cooperate. We need to learn the language, how that cooperation can happen, and the ways of partnership. And that's part of the crisis, of humility, which isn't a quick fix. It's a process. A process of decolonizing our own minds. And most of all, slowing down. The saying by Kumalafe I've been mentioning a few times, times are urgent. We need to slow down. That kind of paradox. Instead of trying to figure it all out with the head, we need to sense into the aliveness in us and around us. And, paying witness to that by sensing into it. It's not a verbal communication. It's on a different level. It's a language we can learn. And we already have, in the Buddha's transmission, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the first one being body. We have done those meditations many times, and on the elements, on the body parts, and remembering death, That's the 3 practices in the first establishment of mindfulness, which are a portal, into this remembering where these bodies are coming from, who they are. Beyond being an individual body, there is much more. There's much more than what meets the eye. So the widening of the context of how we understand ourselves and what we are doing here. To go beyond just this lifetime and understand ourselves as part of a long lineage of life, of ancestors. What is life in us looking for? Those kinds of questions, without jumping to conclusions, but allowing life to show us. And it's already, speaking to us in very stern terms with the polycrisis. Things are falling apart. And how can we be part of that process with kindness? Kindness for ourselves and kindness for others, human or beyond human, or more than human. And also, trusting ourselves and the life which is moving in us. That we can do this work. Because we are part of a living intelligent earth. We don't have to do it alone. It's more making the space so that that intelligence can communicate with us, not through language, but in different ways, because we are eating, drinking, breathing the biosphere all the time. So we're in constant contact, really. Just need to make it conscious. It's actually, in one way, it's quite simple, It's already happening. We just haven't yet adjusted perception. And now we are doing this. That's, what we're doing is an expansion of perception, so we can allow new ways of seeing, or rather new ways of looking at, and then what we see will be different because there's that space there for something new to come through. Because we can trust, that life always will find a way. The life which is inside of our bodies and whatever we can't sense or feel, we need to overthink. And then we go up in the head and get lost there in some patterns which have already been been influencing and keeping us trapped for a long time. So dropping deeper. And being really kind as we are living these changes now from one paradigm to another of self-understanding, and the thinking mind can't lead this, but it's more like Earth speaking to Earth, these Earth bodies. Through the food we eat, the beverages we drink, the air we breathe. And just, we already know the way forward. We already know what needs to be done in terms of expanding perception. That's the first step. That's the foundation from which more information will come through. Don't need to push ourselves. Like a blossoming of a lotus flower, you can't push it. But putting the right causes and conditions in place, that's something we can do. And then the blossoming, the opening is happening as a natural result of the intention and the conditions which we are attracting, if we have the intention to be part of that immune system, to become an antenna for this kind of information. That's brought you here, and that's, draws people here and draws us together, this intention. Even it might not be fully conscious yet, but somehow we all know there needs to be a shift. It's already underway. Then, by listening with the body into the threads of connection, it's just like adding another practice to the toolkit, we have received from Iron Age India. In the same way, as Buddhism has been going to different countries, there was always something adjusted, adapted to the cultural and to the cultural environment and the era. Time, when Buddhism landed in Tibet, for example, the traditional bone culture, which was a shamanistic culture, got woven into the way Buddhism was practiced, or is still practiced today there. When Japan, again, very different appearance. When Thailand, or here, on the west coast of America. Now there's another wave of adaptation by taking in the relationship with the modern human world and making that part of the practice. And finding ways to cooperate with and honor the wisdom of the indigenous people of the different regions and countries in Europe, in America, in Asia, Australia. It's like we are, it's almost like like when a butterfly is being born out of a cocoon. We need to get out of that cocoon of Western scientific approach, which is valuable, but it's too restrictive. It's too tight. It's too anthropocentric. It's something missing, and we hear of it through the polygrasses. The overcoming of human supremacy thinking, which turns out to be a huge trap at this time. And trusting the intelligence of life within and all around us to guide us if we can develop the capacity to really listen. And then responding as life, speaks to us not through words, but in different ways. And trusting that we can receive that information through the body. And that we can know, when we're on the right track on a sensing level. Doesn't necessarily need to be easy. But there's a knowing. And that the willingness, to be with the messiness of transition times. And slowing down. I'm gonna end with sharing with you one more time the medicine song.
Iyaw naka baya chaymi gisi nawang minyukan chi cao say ta su maka paska chi muni kabaya chayawang chắc ma kia khâu no mong đôi biển số ma ta cái ma chay ma ô cô môi re re re